Hello, so welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. A lot of this YouTube series, we've taken you along on different training sessions, doing different fun things, but today we have reached the taper. So I'm going to be talking you through exactly what my training has looked like for the last 13 weeks, how many miles I've banked, where I've banked them, strength sessions, bike sessions, favourite things, worst things that have happened, all of that malarkey, and we're going to take you through week by week and talk all about it. So without further ado, here goes. So please excuse my trusty little spreadsheet that I've got in my hand to help talk about this, but we're going to kick things off with week one. So in week one, I ran a grand total of 49 miles, and it's safe to say that the lack of mileage for me in week one, all contextual, really stressed me out. However, I started off a little bit differently in this marathon block because the first thing that we were targeting was a speedy 5k. So my mileage was a little bit lower and I was doing much more strength-based speed sessions as well. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire with the first session I did this week, which you can see here. Thank you, Ben. Obviously listening to an extremely good playlist, Angry Songs for Angry Girls. We can see what my mood was that week. So we did 10 by 3 minutes, which basically was 800 meter reps in 5:55 a mile. I was conned in this session into thinking it was going to be easier, but there we are. And this week I also did, on top of my 49 miles, 2 gym sessions, which has been the standard throughout most of this block. There was a couple of weeks where I did 1, which I'll come on to, but 2 gym sessions, and also a new introduction for this block, which was my cross train on the bike. So pretty much every week in this block, I've also spent a little bit of time on the bike. This has been like a fairly open-ended situation, like not a specific amount of the time on the bike, but I've just found it really useful to help ease my legs off after some of the tougher sessions that I've been doing. So that week I did 45 minutes on the bike, and that brings us to the end of week 1. So that brings us swiftly on to week 2, where I panicked even more because I ran even less mileage, which seems wrong at the start of a marathon block, but there we are. So in week 2 I ran a grand total of 41 miles in training. This involved a session at Dorney Lake where I nearly lost my to be quite frank, because my first tempo section, which was 10 minutes long, I could not hit pace for at all, and then I was supposed to run even faster. Good news is I easily ran the faster sections. I just really struggled on that initial 10 minutes, but never mind, eh? Also in week 2 I had my first double run day as well. I'd done this a little bit over Christmas, but not in a training block before. So that's been a new introduction in this kind of block of training as well, is that 1 day a week I'm running twice on 1 day. So 1 run in the morning and then 1 run in the evening. The ideal was for us to keep them as far apart as possible. The idea being that you're running on tired legs, which is something that you're doing later in the later stages of the marathon. Now, at the beginning of the block, it was harder to keep them as far away as possible in the day because it was dark, and I don't like running in the dark. So the aim was to keep them about 6 hours apart, whereas as we got later in the block, it was to keep them a minimum of 8 hours apart. So other than that, on week 2 of training, I also did 2 gym sessions, and I apparently sat on the bike for 60 minutes. Clearly, I had something interesting to watch on YouTube that day. Probably my vlog, yeah, to be fair. I was probably approving that week's vlog. Ready for a big one here. Week 3. We have done 51 miles in week 3. But the most important thing that we did in week 3 was set a 5k PB of 19:32 at Battersea Park. Not 19:32. That's wrong. That's very wrong. 18:32. I've taken a whole minute off my time there. 18:32 at Battersea Park, which was kind of the first goal of the block, really, was to take all the training that I'd done from the end of last year where I'd not been in a marathon block and put it to some good use. So I managed to do that. I still kept 2 strength sessions in that week, and they were ticked off, and I sat on the bike for a grand total of 35 minutes. And the other ridiculous thing that I did in week 3 was after I'd gone and run an 18:32, correct, 5k PB, I actually had to run twice the next day, which is the definition of doing a double run on tired legs. So there we are. that is week 3. Hitting up week 4. That's some nice squeaking in the background, if you can hear that. We're back. Week 4 was an exciting one because if you remember, week 4 involved me flying out to Boston to New Balance HQ and kicking off all the exciting fun that I've been doing with these guys during this training block. So week 4, I'm not going to lie, looked a little bit chaotic. Despite the fact that I flew out to Boston and was there for most of the week, I managed a grand total of 56 miles in week 4. 2 gym sessions were still maintained. However, the bike was a bin that week, just because there was no point with flying and fitting everything in. There was 0 point overwhelming my body even more sitting on a bike. It was just pointless. And also, fun things that happened on week 4 that you may remember is Ben got lost in Windsor Park whilst I did a long run on a random Thursday and couldn't tell you why I was long running on a Thursday. So that is week 4. Okay, we're hitting up week 5 now. And as Ben actually just said, as if that's like 10 weeks ago, 9 weeks ago that we're now on. Time has flew. Time has flooded whilst we've been having fun. I don't know what the correct grammar is there. So week 5, 53 miles were completed in week 5, 2 gym sessions and a whole 45 minutes on the bike. And nuts things that I did on week 5 is I got off a plane from the airport where I'd not slept on the flight in the morning, so I got the red eye back and I went straight to the gym to do a tempo session on the treadmill and do my gym session before going to bed because I was convinced it was the only way to get it done. So if you did think I'd lost the plot at any point, yes, I had. And then also that weekend, just to add even more chaos, I went away for the weekend and came back on the Sunday and had to do my tempo run in the evening at Windsor and absolutely smashed it. So there we are. That is week 5 and a grand total of 53 miles. Okay, it's week 6 and from week 4 and 5, you can probably gather what happened in week 6, and that is I felt beyond fatigued, so we had to change things up a little bit. We kept the priority as the running and made sure we got all of that ticked off, but the bike went in the bin and my strength sessions got pulled into 1 strength session for that week, so we kept some in there, but just a little lighter load on the body from strength and prioritised getting all the runs in. So getting all the runs in took us to a grand total of 57 miles in week 6 and highlights of week 6. Ben, can you remember any highlights of week 6? No. Classic. Week 6, I threw a tantrum at the track where I did 8 by 800 meters. And I remember standing at the track actually and saying to you while I was doing the session, in my last block, I couldn't even run 400s at this pace. And now I'm running 800s at this pace.
I remember you threatening to kick me in my penis.
I did also threaten to kick Ben in the Do you want me to kick you in the and claim that there was a shark inside us. It feels like there's a shark doing this inside my So there we go, some fun highlights that we've had that week. I think what we're seeing here is that week 4 and 5 created a lot of fatigue into week 6, basically. And as well as the 8 by 800 session, I also did a 4 by 2 mile session that week, where it was 1 mile at goalish marathon pace. I'll put it here. I don't even know what goal marathon pace is yet, to be clear, so I don't know. And then a mile at current 10k PB pace, then recovery, then repeat times 4. That was a nasty ass session, and I am sorry to anyone at the gym that saw me doing that because I was a mess. So to recap week 6, are we classifying week 6 as kind of halfway? Because what's half of 13? 6.5. Kind of halfway at this point. To clarify, week 6 was 57 miles, 1 gym session, and naffle time on the bike. Okay, week 7, interestingly, was my highest ever mileage week, and actually the highest mileage that I hit in this marathon block. So my mileage was actually highest before the half marathon rather than before the marathon. A little bit different, but we do what we do. So I ran 66 miles in week 7. Strange things that I did that week included running a 10k PB on the treadmill during a session, after which I then had to do 800 meter reps. very concerning. And then claiming that my legs were really, really tired, but then going and running a long run at a stupid pace through central London. So there we are. Some more unhinged behaviour from me that week. Again, back to 2 gym sessions and clearly feeling more myself as I sat on the bike for 40 minutes, apparently doing approvals of emails. So, use your bike time productively. Okay, we're into week 8 now, which is technically the week before I ran Cambridge Half. So it was like a little bit of a cutback before I ran the half marathon the following weekend. But to be honest, it wasn't that much of a cutback. I ran 59 miles in week 8, and I did 2 gym sessions that stayed, and I, for some unknown reason that week, decided to sit on the bike twice. Read into that how you'd like. I have no idea why. Everything was very bunched up that week because I went on a hen do that weekend. It is possible to still have fun during marathon training. Insert photos of hen do here.
Still dressed like a runner.
I did dress as a runner on the hen do, but there was a reason for that, okay? What else do we do? Sessions on this week, which feel slightly unhinged, include 7 by 1 mile. Not very fun. Running a half marathon in the middle of the week, which was just an easy run that I had to tick off in the middle of the week. And doing my long run on the Friday, which was a tempo session as well. Are we ready? Okay. Week 9 was a big one. Week 9 was my tune-up race for the marathon. So I ran Cambridge Half in week 9. And to be quite frank, it didn't go very well. So in week 9, including the half marathon, I ran 40 miles in total. I did 1 strength session, which is normal on a race week for me. I keep some strength in there, but we condense it into a much lighter session, which I do at the beginning of the week. For some unknown reason, clearly I was enjoying my time at the gym at this point. I sat on the bike twice this week. Once for 20 minutes and once for 30 minutes. So the main exciting things that happened on week 9, other than Cambridge Half, was I went to a park run where the course looked like this, and I will allow you to interpret that as you wish. Cambridge Half, however, I did PB. I ran 1:24:44, which was a 1:25:04, 1:24:44, 16, 17, 18, 19, 22nd PB. However, I really was a bit peeved with my performance, if I'm honest. And I said on the day that I just didn't feel myself. Like, Ben was there watching, and I think my friend Vicky, who was there with you as well, said when I came past, she doesn't look herself. I just didn't really feel myself either. I don't know if there was like, I was ill underlying, or you know what, some day at the office. I just came away from Cambridge feeling a bit frustrated that I thought I was fitter than what I'd been able to demonstrate on the day, but sometimes that happens, and it was still a really good trial of all my fueling. Still really important that I stood on a start line, and there were lots of positives to take away from it, but I wouldn't say that I was the happiest with how that went. Okay, are we ready? We've got 4 weeks left to go. Stay with us. Week 10, I'm not going to lie, feels very, very unhinged when I read back on what I did in week 10. I was scrolling through my Strava earlier to write all these stats down, and week 10 is probably where I looked at it and went, you've really lost the plot. So 54 miles were ran on week 10. I sat on the bike for a grand total of 30 minutes, and I did 2 gym sessions, so we were back to kind of normal that week. I did a big tempo around Victoria Park where Ben was on the bike. Thank you very much, Ben, for looking after me that day. I then raced Podium 5K on the Saturday, where I set another new 5K PB of 18:30, so another 2 seconds off what I'd run earlier in the block, and I was really, really pleased with that. I'm not going to lie. I really lined up at the beginning of Podium, and I meant it when I said I had no expectations of how I did in that race, and to come away with another PB, I was just over the moon. I'd raced the weekend before. We'd not cut anything back in the week. I really was in peak marathon training, so was really, really pleased with my performance there. And then on the Sunday, I became even more unhinged and paced my friend around Surrey Half Marathon, but then carried on through the finish line to round up to 20 miles in total. And all of that, to recap, brought us to 54 miles for week 10. Okay, fun game. What week are we going on to next? If you guessed 11, that's correct. Week 11, we're back up in the 60s with a 63-mile week in week 11. An interesting week. 2 strength sessions and 45 minutes on the bike were achieved. In terms of running, did a session with Ben where I can confirm I basically had a mental breakdown. It was 4 by 10 minutes into violent headwind in Victoria Park. I think I threw my Morton bottle at his face at one point and just basically said I couldn't do this anymore. So much pain. But in shocking news, I did indeed hit all the paces on my session. So as per usual, I was just being a drama queen. I also had the most hungover run of my life on the Saturday, which was self-induced, never mind. But then once again behaved like an absolute idiot on my long run, producing this work of art. So there we are. Have some fun, but not too much fun, is my advice.
The stories on race week, get drunk.
Moral of the story is absolutely do not do that. That's a really stupid idea. And just to be clear, I rarely have fun during a marathon training block, but sometimes I allow myself an evening off to have a nice time. Okay, we've made it to our penultimate week of training. We are on week 12, where we hit a grand total of 59 miles on week 12. 2 gym sessions, and clearly I was enjoying my time at the gym this week as I sat on the bike for 60 whole minutes watching paint dry. So it was a fairly standard week in week 12. I did a 10 by 800 meter session, and here are some key playlist recommendations from me for a 10 by 800 meter session, apparently. And I rounded off the week with a 22-mile long run where my Strava map genuinely looks like I'm some sort of unhinged lady that just was running around in circles, because no, I had not planned a route at all. Other than that, it was a fairly standard, boring, ticking over week of training, which produced 59 miles. And without further ado, without further ado, we reach peak week, which was not peak mileage, but was peak week of training before we taper for London Marathon. So week 13, I banked 55 miles in total. I did 2 gym sessions, and I sat on the bike for a total of 90 minutes, split into 60 minutes earlier in the week and then 30 minutes later in the week, which I'll explain in a second. Fun things that happened on week 13 is I tried to keep up with some Team GB athletes while we were up in Manchester, didn't I? Insert some nice footage here of me trying to keep up with them, which was extremely scary. I did a session which involved me needing to run a 1935k twice and then running even more miles even faster than that, which feels absolutely baffling. And then we come on to the pinnacle, really, of this training block. And honestly, after last week's training, I just am really pleased and feel like I'm heading into London Marathon in a really, really positive place. And that's what happened at Dorney Lake on Sunday, which we've never been more frustrated we didn't bring a camera along to, because I had the race of my life when I wasn't meant to be racing. So essentially what happened is on the Friday evening, I really didn't feel very well at all. I was having a really bad endo flare-up. So I decided to go sit on the bike for half an hour, just because I find sometimes easing my legs through a relaxed bike can kind of help loosen up my lower back, which is where I get quite a lot of my endo pain. And clearly that worked, because basically the plan of action was that I wasn't going to be racing Dorney Half. The plan of action was to do a 5-mile warm-up, nice and chilled, then do the race at between 6:30 to 6:35 minute per mile pace, which should have produced, I believe, somewhere around a 124, 125, but like a high 124, so like not quite a PB, just under a PB, or a 125, then do a 4-mile cool down to take me up to 22 miles in total for the long run. And that was my last long run before we then tapered. However, essentially what happened is I produced this. I am also baffled. I don't know how this happened, but I felt absolutely glorious, clearly. So I started out at the 6:30 per mile pace. It was actually quite a good day at Dorney. If you've raced at Dorney before, you'll know that if you get it on a bad day, if it's really windy, it can be really quite difficult. But there was a section near the top where there was quite bad wind. And because they put on the races, like lots of different races at the same time, there's 5K, 10K, half marathon, different duathlon distances, etc. It can be quite difficult to find your space in the race because you're on a slightly different course to some people, and when you rejoin, you're running at a faster pace than they are, and you can get stuck and things like that. And essentially what happened is I kind of ended up in no man's land. So I was running 6:30s, but I was really by myself and finding it quite mentally challenging. So decided to kind of move forward slightly and tuck in. I don't know this guy's name. If you're watching this and you know what I'm talking about, thank you, because I had a great race because of you. I tucked in with this guy in front and was just a bit like, he seems to be running around the same pace as me. And then with 2 laps to go, he basically just dropped the hammer, is how I would explain this situation. And I was just kind of tuned out from my watch because I'd not started the half marathon as a new activity on my watch. So I didn't even know what time I was on for the half or anything. Like, I had my laps coming up, so I knew what pace I was running each mile, but I couldn't do I'm not very good at maths. I couldn't do the maths surrounding that. So it's just like, I'm just going to tuck in with him and see what happens. And then I came away with 1:24:01, which is a 43-second half marathon PB during a 22-mile long run on my peak week of marathon training. So I think that's what we'll call a confidence booster, really. I'm very happy with that, and it does feel like I've had the confidence boost that I wanted from a race in this block now. And having spoken to my coach after the race, hilariously, he said it was actually what he anticipated that I would go and do, and he'd programmed it that way deliberately. So there we are. I didn't even turn up in race kit. I wore training kit, and I was basically conned into running a half marathon PB. So defy your coach is what I'm saying, because they probably meant you to defy them. They absolutely didn't. Just to clarify, don't defy your coach. My coach just knows me too well and knew what I would produce if he told me to do that. So that is 13 weeks of marathon training, and now we're going to be going into a 3-week taper, which brings me to 16 weeks in total. And throughout those 13 weeks, the grand total, according to my abysmal maths of what I have done, is 703 miles of time on feet-ish, because I rounded some weeks up and some weeks down where there was decimal points. Main things that I would say have happened in this block of training. Gosh, it's windy out here, isn't it? Windy out here, I'm eating all my hair. The main things that I would say we've achieved in this block are we've taken my 5K PB from 1904 to 1830, which feels like a solid achievement. That's a 34-second improvement in 5K PB. And I've taken over a minute off my half marathon PB as well. Strava still thinks I'm less fit than 2 years ago, so that's a really good sign going into this marathon. Rude. However, I've used my Coros watch the whole way through this marathon block. Not an ad, genuinely love my Coros watch, have had it forever, and it's what I use day in, day out for training. But they have some really useful metrics, and I logged into the portal yesterday just to kind of have a look at what those metrics look like for the whole 16 weeks of my training. And one of the metrics is base fitness. Yeah, look at that. That's what we want to see. So while Strava hates me, Coros loves me, and hopefully we're in decent shape heading in to the taper. So as I said, the taper is going to last 3 weeks. When you watch this, I will have already done a week of my taper. So when you watch this, we will be 2 weeks out from race day. And next week, we're going to take you along on a run with me where I answer all your questions about tapering and what that taper looks like as well. So if you're interested in making sure that you've got your taper set up properly, or you've got any questions or want to know more about that, then make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out next week. But that is the grand total of my marathon training, really. That's it. The hay is in the barn. All we have to do now is sleep a lot, fuel really well, avoid people with colds, and try and keep the confidence high. And I would say that my confidence is in a good place. I feel really, really positive going into the race, provided everything goes okay during this taper. And I think the thing I'm genuinely happiest about and most impressed with is that I've genuinely just loved every single second of training during this block. Like, I've not missed a single run in 13 weeks, touch wood. There's been some areas where we've condensed strength training or dumped a bike for the week, but the runs have been there 150% ticked off gold star for me. Can we put a gold star here? Gold star for me. And this is the mileage that we produced. Nice graph in here of what was going on the whole time. It's been a bit different. I've run a lot higher mileage than I've run before. I feel like there's been, because I've had 4 races in there's been a bit more up and down than I would normally expect. And it kind of felt like it got off to a really slow start as well, because the mileage wasn't as high with the 5K. But I've really, really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the addition of those double run days. I've enjoyed challenging myself more. I think the biggest thing that I've stopped doing is looking at sessions and panicking about them. I've instead managed to change my mindset to, my coach wouldn't set this unless he knew I could do it. So let's go out there and prove that I can do it. And I think that's just the mentality that I want to have now going into race day as well, is done everything I can. And all that matters is doing 26.2 miles now with a smile on my face, right?
Run across that bridge really fast.
Yeah. So basically, all I've got to do in 14 days' time, if you're watching this the day it comes out, is run across that bridge, be about halfway at that point, and not run the fastest 100 metres of my life like I've done in previous years and build up lactic in my legs, but lap it up and love every single second of it. So thank you so much for coming along on the journey for the last 13 weeks. We got 3 more weeks of these YouTubes to go. We've got more than 3 more weeks. We're carrying on. But I hope you've enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.